Welcome back to Wisper Business Talk. I want to thank each and every one of you for joining us this morning. I am your host, Dario Mackins, and always present with me is my co-host, Amanda Gress.
Good morning.
Good morning. Today's topic of discussion, what we're going to have for all of our viewers are going to be HR, so human resources Q&A session. And for that purpose, we also have a very special guest. This is the woman, the myth, the legend, the one and only downtown Kylie Brown.
Hello.
Good morning, Kylie. Yeah, good morning to you, Kylie. I want to thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to join me and Amanda this morning for HR Q&A. Before we go ahead and get started, though, how about you tell our viewers what your role is here in Wisper?
Sure. So I am the head of human resources. I've been with Wisper for about 8.5 years. I've worked in the HR world for about 12 years total. So my role with the team is really I lead an awesome group of women, helping do whatever we can to make all of our employees happy and successful at work.
And for my co-host, Amanda, why don't you go ahead and please reintroduce yourself to our viewers today as well.
Yeah, sure. So as Kylie mentioned, I work with and for Kylie. She's the leader of our pack, and I head up essentially the onboarding portion of the HR experience at Wisper. I've been in our HR department since 2015, so just a handful of years under my belt, but a little bit longer with Wisper, and love the direction that Kylie and our leadership team is taking us there.
All right, excellent. Thank you for that reintroduction. As previously stated, our topic today is going to be HR, so human resources Q&A. So for any of our viewers that are joining us today, feel free to drop any comments in the comment section, and we'll make sure to try to get those questions and comments answered for you. We do have some comments and questions that was previously submitted over, so we'll go ahead and get started, and we'll just dive right into it. So kind of looking over what was previously submitted, it says, one of the things that came through, it says, while HR is present in most of our working lives, for anyone who wants a quick rundown, can Kylie, you go ahead and tell us, what HR, what human resources totally includes?
Sure. So overall, HR encompasses, a lot of things, but I think in the, simplest terms, it's a group of people who are responsible for managing the full life cycle. So we have recruiting, hiring, onboarding, training, offboarding, all of that stuff that goes along with the employee, and anything in between. So benefits, coaching, things like that. I think a lot of times when people hear HR, their mind immediately goes towards the more uncomfortable aspects of work. So like the violations and investigations and terminations and all of that stuff. And while those things are involved, hopefully infrequently, when you break it down, what we're really here to do is to support the employees. So we're literally a resource for our employees. We want them to be successful and have really fulfilling work lives.
All right. Yeah, definitely that. Anything you would like to add to that, Amanda?
No, I think Kylie summed that up really well as far as essentially the basics of what HR entails.
Okay. Yep. It kind of does lead into the next question here that was submitted. Comes through, says that sometimes HR does have that stigma or have the vibe for being only for the employer and not for the employees. So can you take a little bit of time to speak on that?
Yeah, I mean, anybody who follows the news has probably seen some of the, horror stories that come from HR. Recently, I just read the article about, Uber and kind of how their HR department was a big part of the cover up in the company, and with a lot of, unsavory things that were happening. And so, in my opinion, a company can only be as successful as their employees are. You can have the greatest idea, the greatest product, the greatest service, but if you don't have a good team to back it up, you're not going to go very far. So I think in recent years, there's been a shift of companies realizing that HR are more than just paper pushers. And that historically, while HR has been more transaction based, so payroll and record keeping and compliance and all of those, boring things that are necessary. A lot of times HR fell into the trap of taking over what should be the manager's responsibility. And so I think there's been a shift in switching towards more of a people-based HR model that really aligns with the company's, culture and core values, and really focuses on empowering the managers to actually be good people managers, which in turn, it's just better for everybody. HR should not be the only one pushing that out.
For sure. I just to kind of like piggyback on that, in addition to empowering managers to kind of be responsible for those relationships and the communications with their employees, I think a huge push we're seeing as well is really taking that step towards empowering your employees, even at a non-management level. Like, what are you doing to ensure that your employees have the opportunity to grow? Is it growing in their skill set, like what they're actually able to do to promote within? Because nobody wants to stay stagnant. And so the way you keep your employees around is to give them those offerings for growth. The other part of it as well is the investment in them on a little bit softer side. We've talked about maybe having a totally separate session about like the importance of soft skills, because that is something that's totally relevant, that you can be a fantastic programmer, but if your people skills are really, really poor, like it's very difficult to work with and maybe for that person. So kind of improving your employees' skill set on the both ends of that spectrum.
And I definitely can kind of vouch for that. Just like speaking with customers over the phone, I believe is one of my strong suits, but like the face-to-face interactions, having meetings and those types of things, while I think I'm okay at it, I definitely struggle at it. So being here, taking the phone calls, answering, having that type of conversation with customers is my strong suit, and Wisper has actually put me in a great place to succeed in doing that. So, all right, so let's kind of hit on some of the topics that are kind of relevant in HR today. One of the big things right now is kind of COVID in the workplace. How do you reopen? How do you stay open? How do you ensure that all of your employees, your customer base are going to be safe? So that was one of the questions that came through. So at the forefront, it says at the forefront of pretty much everything right now, how has COVID changed human resources?
Yeah, so obviously COVID took us all by surprise, and it really forced us to think outside of the box as a company. I remember when this first started back in March, we called an emergency meeting of all leadership and management, and we were sitting in the room, and it was like, where do we even start? Because, we are in the unique, maybe not so unique situation that a good portion of our workforce can't work from home. The people that are able to work from home, we definitely sent home, and we'll touch on that. But for the people that we had to have out in the field, our essential personnel, it was really important for us to look at modifying ways to also keep them safe. And so one of the things we did is, we have our field installers, and they are coming into constant contact with our customers. And so we really put a lot of time and effort into figuring out ways to limit that customer contact while still being able to provide the essential service to our customers. On the HR side for hiring. So some companies were put in the unfortunate position to have to lay some people off. We fortunately were the exact opposite. We have been full speed ahead on hiring. We've hired over 80 people in the last 6 months. Yes. And I will not lie to you guys, it was a little bit frightening when we realized that we were going to be executing a massive hiring plan, and surprise, everybody's from home. So we had our entire HR department working from home. And so the inter-department communication became really, really important, keeping everybody on the same page with that. Another big shift was just going totally digital with the hiring process. I'm sure many of you out there can sympathize, but Zoom became our best friend, whether we liked it or not. There were a lot of challenges with that. One of the things that Amanda and I were talking about, that it's really important to explain the process to the candidates at all times, but even more so in this situation, because they don't have the benefit of that face-to-face contact with you. And so, for example, when you're doing interviews and you come on the Zoom, and I think it's very valuable to explain to them up front, like, hey, I'm going to be taking notes during this interview. So when I'm looking down, I'm not ignoring you. I'm not paying attention. This is what I'm doing. Doing anything that you can to really minimize those uncomfortable silences that always happen where everybody's just staring at each other. Having the conversation with the person you're doing the interview with. So like the hiring manager ahead of time, that you can say, here's how we're gonna, maybe ask the questions. I'll ask one and then you ask one, more of a round robin situation. I think it's important to be upfront and clear so that everybody knows what to expect. Doing the interviews via Zoom also presented a challenge, just because you don't have that face-to-face. So I think you have to be a lot more purposeful about listening and tuning in and really paying attention to their nonverbals, which sometimes are hard to pick up on when you're on a video feed. So I also think that another thing that COVID did really change for us is being cognizant of the stress that our employees are under. And I think we're going to touch on that a little bit more later, but not only are a lot of our people working from home and having to deal with the change of that, but they're also forced into the situation of being teachers. We have a really young workforce, and a lot of our employees are parents. We are a really big family-based company, and we wanted to do what we could to help ease some of that stress. So one of the things we implemented is, in any position that allowed it, we did flexible scheduling. So some of our people, they come on for a couple hours in the morning, and then they're off for 3-4 hours to be able to help homeschool their kids. And so really having that communication with our managers to let them know that we're empowering you to make these decisions based on our core values, and what's in the best interest of the employee and the customer. So there's obviously that balancing act there. Another big thing would be finding ways to stay connected working from home. So one thing that we implemented, Amanda, who was it in our department that came up with the virtual breakfast? I don't even remember.
It actually came up from one of our CERs. She brought it up as like hey, this was a really fun thing that we had tried with like the happy hours. What if we tried it as like a breakfast opportunity for just a different time frame?
Yeah, so we implemented 2 days a week for 15 minutes in the morning. I think it's 7:45 to 8, and we just open up the Zoom bridge or Microsoft Teams bridge, and invite everybody to hop on and just say hi and start your day with some team camaraderie. We do some fun trivia questions and little giveaway prizes and stuff. But really, it's just a time for people to connect and have that face-to-face interaction before they dive into their work from home day. So another thing we did was bingo. We're always looking for ways to involve everybody in the company. And it's really hard when you have some people that, work in the office, and some people that work from home, and some people that work in the field, and they're all working opposite schedules. And so we actually borrowed this idea from one of our vendors, and we did a bingo game. So we put out this bingo. We did a quarantine themed bingo, and so everybody fills out their bingo card, and then for 1 week we send words each morning. They fill out their bingo card, they win prizes. So just things like that. Amanda, what else have you seen?
I made just like a couple of little notes that as you were talking, things that kind of jogged my memory. The nonverbal part that you talked about in the interview process, I 1000% saw that when I was doing orientation. Our orientation moved to a completely remote setup as well, which was a unique challenge for us that we had to adapt to very quickly. I was actually out on like a planned absence for the first couple weeks that COVID hit. So I came back in to pick up my monitors and then go back home working from home and just try and like readapt to what we were doing from there. And it was right off the bat orientation from home. And I can't tell you, it was literally every single orientation that I had to tell the people that I was with that day, like, I'm going to be 100% honest. This isn't my preferred way to do this. There is something to be said of what gets lost in translation over Zoom. I can't see your nonverbals. I can't pick up on it as easily. There's other things that are serving as distractions. So if you catch me going like, what was that? It's because I'm trying to be like highly aware of anything, when there's 7 people on your screen to catch somebody who might have a question. It was challenging, but it was something I think that made us just more perceptive on it, honestly.
And just if you could just kind of explain and let them know that our onboarding process was in the office prior to COVID, and it was an all-day session, correct?
Yeah. And we tried to mimic as much of that as possible, but here's the other things that become out of your control, right? Like when you start shipping things out to people, what you hope is that it's going to make it there on time. It's not as simple or as easy as having a workstation set up for them on their first day. But this truly is like their first exposure to the company, like as an employee. So you're still trying to make sure that it's as like structured and routine and cohesive as possible, giving them that same employee experience, but just at home. And so there was stuff that we definitely had to like hurdles that we had to overcome. And it wasn't perfect by any means, but it did cause us to learn. And honestly, if I have to, you ask for a little bit of grace with it. Like, I know this isn't going to be perfect, and I apologize in advance for anything that's missed. But what I need from you in this time is like, ask me. If you feel like I forgot something, ask me, because I probably did.
I would say overall, people were just thrilled that we were still hiring. So I think they were happy to provide us that grace.
If I had to say the like one thing, the positive that has come from COVID, in my opinion, it's definitely the increase in communication. And in the beginning, I think it was almost by force, where it was like, Kylie, I don't think that you mentioned this, but during COVID, we actually brought on 2 new people to our HR department. So they not only had to go through orientation, but training. And we're still working in a pretty much remote environment where there's still most people working from home. And so for them to adapt,
when COVID hit.
So for them to adapt and then serve in this like human capacity, it was a challenge for sure. And we're seeing the efforts on that. But what that meant on our side is we have to be extremely clear and maybe repetitive, not in a negative way, about what our expectations and what our processes look like, so that nothing can be left behind. And I remember pretty much once I came back from my leave and was hopping back into normal life working, we had like a project. And this may sound like a totally forced kind of project because it was intentional. But we had a project where we split up our employee list, and our work was to make contact with every single employee. And the purpose was just for the purpose of making contact with them. And for our new members of our HR team, it was actually a really great avenue for them to introduce themselves because they hadn't met all of our employees before. And for myself, for the people who had been hired while I was out, I didn't get to do their orientation. So that was my opportunity as well. But for our employees, that was that like purposeful, intentional contact with them of how are you doing? We know that stuff is weird right now, and a lot of stuff feels up in the air, and you're taking a lot of extra stuff on. Do you need anything? And so I think it was a really good intentional communication. In addition to that, like company-wide, our all hands meetings, which are our company meetings, have moved to a fully remote format. So right now we use Teams, but previously it was on Zoom. And in the past, prior to that, we had done them in person, and then people could watch the recorded videos afterwards. And honestly, there's a little bit of a disconnect from that. We have received amazing feedback from people that this inclusive, all remote, everybody is hopping on from their own computers, that it's been a really positive change. You can just see kind of the buzz going on in the chat as the meeting's going on and people really participating. So that's kind of one of the exciting things that have come from COVID coming about. I did read an article that the phrase that they used was like, HR's time right now, what our purpose should be is essentially that like preservation of our employee. Kylie mentioned it before. Our employees are taking on totally different roles in their personal lives, and their work lives are shifting into my work is now at home with me. And I still have all of these things that I need to keep up on, but it's blended in with teaching my children from home, and maybe my spouse is having maybe there were layoffs at my spouse's work. Maybe there's healthcare concerns that are associated with it. So there's a lot of extra stress that are on our employees right now. And our job in HR is to make sure that we're highly aware of that and just there for them and supporting in what ways we can feasibly do so.
And I will say you guys have done an excellent job in handling all things that have came across during these crazy times. So I know there's a few emails that I kind of keep a lookout for. I'm pretty sure you guys know which email that is. I won't name it here, but one of the other questions that did come through as well is looks like someone has some questions regarding employee engagement. And their question is that employee engagement is becoming increasingly trendy in today's world. What does this mean for things you are actually seeing implemented and playing out in the real world for employee engagement?
Yeah. So employee engagement is kind of like the perpetual buzzword right now. What does that actually mean? I think for a lot of people, it can mean, different things depending on how you look at it. I saw a definition and I can't remember where it was from. It was from it wasn't Gallup poll, but it was one of the poll places. And it really simplified it for me. It defined engagement as an employee's willingness and ability to contribute to a company's success. Plain and simple. And I think that's a really interesting way to look at it. It's what are you doing as an HR person to make your employees willing to do this? What skills and opportunities and care are we providing to them that makes them want to contribute to our success? So I think that another thing for the trends for engagement is really leading the workplace and proactive policies that help not only attract but retain good employees. So these can be really simple things. One of the changes that we made, and it's been a couple of years now, but we have our bereavement policy. It's a pretty standard bereavement policy that most companies have. If somebody in your life that, was to pass away, unfortunately, you would get X amount of time off. And previously, the way our policy had been worded was that it had to be someone in your immediate family. And I don't even remember who it was, but we had an employee that one of their, really good college friends had passed away. And she asked me, hey, am I able to use this? She's not in my immediate family. And my first reaction was, why not? I mean, who are we to tell you that you can be sad about losing in your life? If the ultimate goal of your policy is to be able to provide a benefit to your employees and to show that human touch, like Amanda touched on, why wouldn't we? And so no problem, we made the switch. So I think it's things like that, looking at it on more of like a broader spectrum of what can we do to really show that we care. So another big thing would be just guiding your managers to practice good employee care. And what that means, if you read a lot of, HR blogs and stuff, they call it good employee hygiene. I don't like that. I think it sounds but, encouraging them to have regular one-on-ones with their employees, giving timely and constructive feedback, developing those healthy communication between, back and forth. And so I think that, a lot of that stuff, I don't want to say it gets overlooked, but it's really important because if they don't have a good relationship with their manager, they're not going to stay. So one thing that has not changed in HR is that people don't leave companies, they leave managers. And so if our job is to help foster that good relationship, I think everybody's going to be better for it. You're going to see happier employees who actually want to work for your company. They want to stay because they feel valued, they feel happy at the end of the day.
I think that the definition that you read off from whatever article you read is actually very cool. Something that I had noted for this question was essentially like your ways that you work towards engagement at your company. It really, I think, needs to be specific to your company's culture and what your core values are and where you stand as a company, who you represent. We can tell you all day long, like the examples that we see here, because that's what we're living out and what we're really working really hard at. But if it's not the way your company is structured and that's not what's important and relevant for your scene, then that may not be the right push out for your employees. Yeah, so the human touch thing, I mean, we talk about that over and over, and I don't know if anybody's watched any of the previous videos, but that is for sure a huge piece of what we're trying to do here, that we don't want to ever be seen as only focused on what the employer positivity is going to be from some policy or procedure or whatever that looks like, that we remember that at the end of the day that our employees are what's important, and our customers will reap the benefits when our employees are well taken care of. So ensuring that that human factor is in everything we do. And something new that we're working on is essentially like, how do you define that when you bring new people in to your HR department? How do you, I don't want to make it like so routine that everything feels exactly the same, but how do you give someone an outline as to like how to have a human touch? And so that's something that Kylie and our leadership team have been working really hard with every department on, like, how do you keep that within what you do in a really tangible way? And for me, that was like, yes, this is amazing. It was also very like ironic, or like what you would call maybe a juxtaposition of like having something that feels very natural and very like human, like not using this human piece of it, but having it be like systematic in terms of like repeatable. So that was kind of cool. I think something just like super, super simple that we've been doing and seeing here, and something that people can easily implement, is that small question of like, do you need anything? How can I help you? If at the end of the day, an employee knows that someone is asking about them and someone is caring about them and someone has some sort of support network, offering for them, I think that does a lot for their investment into the company. Hopefully our goal is that they see that from their peers and they see that from their direct manager, and then the ask from HR is like icing on the cake. But those simple things go a really, really long way.
Yep, all those things are excellent, and I know you talked about companies finding what they need to do, customize it to their companies. I know, but one thing that we do here great is the surveys that go out. So you give the employee an anonymous opportunity to give feedback. So we take that feedback in, and then there's also the suggestion drop box, which is also anonymous. And those things kind of seem like, here's an anonymous drop box for suggestion. You can put a piece of paper in there with the suggestion. Is the person that's going to actually look at it, read it, or is it going to go just right in the trash, right? But I've seen some excellent changes come about within our company and organization based upon those anonymous surveys and suggestions. So
I think that's actually a really good point, Dario. Those surveys are great tools. Your employees have to see that they are being acted upon in some capacity. One of the things that we did is we do a weekly newsletter. So Christina in our marketing department, she puts out a fantastic newsletter each week that just has a bunch of things going around the company. It's a communication tool, but also we recognize, birthdays and anniversaries and things like that. And occasionally we will put things, this came in through the free suggestion box and this is how we're acting on it. Because if they don't see action, they're going to stop making suggestions.
That's correct.
Not to drag this point on too long, but it makes me think about like, we use traction here. And so what we always talk about is measuring ourselves, like, how are we doing? And if you're not putting questions out there, the surveys to ask about like, how do you feel about this? Or what do you think about your HR department and how they're performing? If you're not asking, you may be missing a huge opportunity to improve your department. And we just went through this process on the onboarding side. We moved from onboarding just occasionally to more and more frequently. And there were things that like, it wasn't like hey, I'm trying to confuse you on purpose. The exact opposite, actually. Like, I want your process to be as smooth as possible. But the way you do things may come across as very confusing or not helpful. And if you aren't seeking that feedback from people and taking that chance to improve it, then you're not helping the people who come behind them. So.
And I think sometimes we take for granted that it's things that we do all the time. Like, yeah, this is easy, like filling out your 401k paperwork, no big deal. And the people who are on the receiving end of it are like,
Yes. And without that employee engagement and that feedback, sometimes we feel like we have to change just for the sake of changing, right? And if we feel like we have to change just for the sake of changing, we're going to kind of come up with some of our own ideas that just pop to the top of our head. So I love seeing the commercials from like the fast food chains where they'll say, back by popular demand, the vegetable Whopper. And I'm like, who
Who requested that?
voted for a vegetable Whopper to return? So, yeah.
Dude, I love the Impossible Burger. It's good.
Never tried it. All right. So it looks like we did have another question that just actually came through. This person said, so we mentioned earlier about the viewpoint that HR is just transaction based, almost a paper pusher. So how are you guys addressing that in what we do here at Wisper?
Yeah, I can start. So I think a big, obvious answer is we move towards more efficiency. We are constantly trying to look at what systems we can put in place to make it easier for the employees. A big one, and I think I touched on it earlier, is we migrated to Microsoft Teams. So whatever your company's preferred platform is, it doesn't have to be Teams, but having some sort of, cohesive environment where everybody can have, good communication channels. I think that that's really important. Like I said, we're doing a lot of hiring. So our applicant tracking system that we put into place not only makes it a better experience for the candidates, it makes it a better experience for the employees who have to deal with it. So you have to think when you're hiring, it's not just HR that's involved. It's the hiring department and whoever they bring in for interviews and things like that. And if you make the process really cumbersome, people dread it. And we don't want them to dread that. Hiring should be a great thing, right? We're bringing people in. We want to welcome them into our Wisper family. It should not be a bad experience. So another thing that we've worked on is more like self-serve systemized benefit platform. So we use, it's called Employee Navigator. And that just really makes it easier on everybody. Again, you're taking something that should be good. So benefits, right? Who doesn't want more benefits with the company? That's something that you always hear that people say that they want. Let's make it easy for them, because something that should be good shouldn't have a negative spin because it's too hard for them to deal with. So, and then just overall making sure that your processes are documented. So, HR is big on the, process documentation, but that will also help you move towards putting systems in place that are going to hopefully eliminate much of that paper pushing.
Yeah, and Kylie brings up a really important thing here on the documentation side, and I think that it's important to note, like, it doesn't matter how big you are right now or how big your HR team or your company is in terms of what systems you have in place. We are at that point that we're being able to transition into more and more of that, of having like these tools before us to be able to use them. But I assure you, we came from very humble beginnings, and things as simple as Excel spreadsheets, Word docs, or PDFs that you're using as checklists, those go a really long way in ensuring essentially that you have a method for doing something and for tracking it and ensuring that it gets done. If you're not having to do it so very often, then yeah, maybe it is a little bit more manual of a process, but at least when you have those things in place that I spend the bulk of my time here, and this would be an investment as to where I should go in terms of like bringing a system in to streamline this. And in terms of like documentation, the documentation piece is huge. I think what it helps with for sure is knowing your process. It's really easy to get into the habit of doing something all the time, right? We do X, Y, and Z every single time we go through the hiring process. Knowing why you do those steps is as important as having them written down and following through on them. What we've worked really hard to try and do, and this has actually come up pretty recently within our own department, is make sure that the steps we have in play are not arbitrary, right? Like the reason we do something has an end result or an end purpose with that action. That's right. And if you skip that step, well, then you're missing out on that. And what we don't want to have is just routine paperwork or routine steps for the sake of doing it. So if you have a step that's in part of your process, you make sure it's worthwhile and that you actually follow through on it. And we've seen that in-house where we've had to like self-correct on that, essentially, where it was like, oh, whoops, we weren't going back on this and we need to. So you're going to make some missteps along the way. What's that?
some of the things you'll find that you really weren't using. And, that's a perfect opportunity to get rid of it and,
Absolutely.
make it an easier process all around.
Absolutely. Yep. So I think my purpose in that is like, regardless of size, there's a way to be more efficient in the things that you do, so that your time is spent hopefully less on like the steps and more with the people.
All right. Yep. Those are some great answers and responses there. Looks like that actually is all of our questions from our viewers, and that was pre-submitted to us. So I would just like to actually thank Kylie for taking the time out of her busy morning again to join me and Amanda here at Wisper
It was a
Business
good
Talk.
time. Thank you.
So
This is where we address the fact that this is a very special appearance. Kylie does not love public speaking, and so she's a round of applause for joining us today. The slow
very
clap.
much, yep, very much appreciated. All right, so that's going to bring us to the end of our show. If there are any additional questions, you can always reach out to Kylie or Amanda or our HR department in a whole. That email address would be hr@wisperisp.com, or you can pick up the phone, give us a call, 800-765-7772. So that does bring us to the end of our show. Again, thank you, Kylie. Thank you to my wonderful co-host, Amanda Gress. I am Dario Mackins, and we'll look forward to seeing you on the next episode of Wisper Business Talk.
Thanks, Easy.
Thank you.
Hi, Kylie.
Bye.
Down.